According to AAA, the national average price for a gallon of regular gas this morning is $4.11. That's up more than $1.10 since the start of the war back in February. And look at this. Brown University now says the total consumer burden since the start of the war for gasoline and diesel alone is more than $73 billion and going up by the minute. All of this is having a massive impact on your wallet. CNN senior business reporter David Goldman is here to make it make sense for all of us. David, today's question, how much is the Iran war actually costing American families?
It's a lot, Wolf. I mean, you were talking about gas prices. Now, this price, the $4.11, that's up almost 40 cents from where we were just a couple weeks ago, and that adds up. I mean, $305 is your average bill for the increase in gas prices, and $253 for diesel. That really matters because everything comes on a truck, including your grocery prices, which have cost you an average of $240 more during the course of the war. Also, we're all paying for transportation, and that has added $110 to your average bill just to get around. Now, it's not just gas prices that are raising costs for you, also mortgage rates, because oil has raised bond yields, and this affects your mortgage, and now you're paying on average $200 a month more if you get a new mortgage because those rates have increased. We're up to almost 6.6%. We were below 6% just before the war, and when you have the median home price of $441,000 in this country, that really adds up. But it's not just the cost to you as a consumer, it's also the cost to you as a taxpayer. And the average cost per taxpayer for the military cost of this war is $280 just over the past few months. Wolf, it's really starting to add up. We are now looking at a grand total of nearly $1,400 per average American household for the cost of the war.
Yeah, and if the war continues to escalate as it looks like it is, that's going to go up and up and up. Yesterday, I had a chance, David, to fill up my car with regular gas. And take a look at this. I took a picture, $5.59 a gallon, regular gas. What is the highest national average we've ever seen?
Yeah, that's quite a bit higher than the average that we had before. In 2022, we were at $5.02. Now, if you remember, there was a ton of inflation in 2022. So that is now almost $6. It was $5.90 in today's money. So clearly, we have a little bit of room to go, but people like you are paying something pretty close to this, depending on where you're getting gas, Wolf.
Yeah, before the war, the average price for a gallon of regular gas was $2.98.
That's right.
And recently, it's right now, the average price around the country is $4.10. And when I was paying $5.59, that's way higher here in the D.C. area. David Goldman, thanks as usual for making it make sense.
I want to bring in CNN's global economic analyst, Rana Ferreira, who's also Financial Times global business columnist. Rana, great to have you with us. I mean, what a time to be talking right now. There's just so much uncertainty in terms of where things are headed right now. You've got Brent crude sitting below $100 a barrel right now. Nobody knows where it's going. Everyone's in a holding pattern to see what happens this weekend. Is it escalation or not? But I have to say the bond market is also showing something really interesting because it is signaling more inflation.
Yeah, absolutely, Eleni. Look, let's think about the last few weeks and months. I mean, we can talk about what might happen by tomorrow, but what we know has happened for the last few months, and indeed, over a year now in Trump too, is that you've had repeated use of choke points, weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz, tariffs becoming an issue again. These are the things that markets worry about inflation around. And there doesn't seem to be any reason to think that whatever happens in the short term with oil, that the Strait of Hormuz is not going to continue to be a key global choke point that will simply require a higher price, demand a higher price in the markets because of the uncertainty, because of the sense that we don't know where things are going to be from day to day. You add into that the president's latest tariff threats, and you're kind of off to the races. We've been here before at the beginning of Trump 2. We've been here many times. I expect we'll be here again. Why the president is doing this in advance of midterms, very tough to say, because I can tell you the one price that Americans see every single day is the price at the pump, and they are not happy about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so important in terms of how the American consumer is feeling, because it frankly erodes spending power as well. When we look at sort of this new maritime front that's opened up, and that's Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea, there's a lot of concern around, whether that reality has really sunk into oil markets and into the global markets as yet. That being said, we have seen some vessels that are Chinese owned that have been able to transit, even though they have originated from a Saudi Arabian port. So we don't really know how that is going to play out, but that's just an extra issue, taking more oil out of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that they're Chinese vessels. I think one aspect of the story that really hasn't been reported on enough is China owns the seas. China owns the maritime industry. China has 5,500 ocean-going vessels. America has 187. So if the Chinese wanted to use that maritime power, use their growing economic power, not just to negotiate special deals in choke points, but to really, prioritize their own ships, their own commercial goods, their own trading partners, they can very, very easily do that. I actually have a new book myself coming out on the topic in October, so this is something I'm paying a lot of attention to.
Yeah, I mean, it's super fascinating. You mentioned tariffs quite extensively, and we had to do a double take this week when tariffs kind of came up again, because I was like, well, hang on, aren't we dealing with enough uncertainty? You're just adding more to the greater scheme of things. But I wonder how this is going to play out, because the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against the sweeping tariffs imposed last year. So how are these going to sort of get through the system? I'm kind of confused. Could you explain that?
Yeah, for sure. So if you go back to that Supreme Court ruling, we always knew that the Supreme Court could strike down those blanket tariffs. However, there was always the possibility that the president could use extra means, extra 301 cases, 232 cases, basically start to use a more piecemeal strategy, let's say, to try and take on adversaries and allies alike. As it turns out, there's 60 countries that are now dealing with new tariffs, the possibility of them. It's not as easy of a strategy as to say we are simply putting on blanket tariffs, and if the Supreme Court had said yes, that's fine. But it is a strategy, and in some ways it kind of feeds on Trump's desire for chaos, for surprise. I will say Jameson Greer, I think, is being authentic in his desire to knock forced labor out of the supply chains of anyone who's sending goods to the U.S., and I understand that. I think that's a legitimate and valid reason to use tariffs as a weapon. But some of the other reasons we're seeing, the abuse of Depression era laws against Canada, surprise tariffs on allies. It's more of the same chaos. It's not serving the president at home, and it's certainly not serving him abroad.
Yeah. So Rana, this sort of feels like weaponization of absolutely everything at this point in time. You've written extensively around sort of what a post-globalized economy would look like. And you said that you've got a new book coming out very soon. I don't know how you put that together with so much changing on the geopolitical front of you, which is sort of editing, sort of every week, because there's so much that's influencing what it'll mean going forward for the global economy. So tell me, what is your take on where this ends and how it lands?
Yeah. Well, my take, and this is, again, the topic of the new book is called Sea Change, America's New Great Game in the Arctic. I was looking at the Arctic as just one geopolitical theater, but it's all about choke points. It's all about regionalization. And fundamentally, it's, I think, a new 19th century style great game in which the US and China are going to be duking it out in multiple territories, with adversaries and allies coming in at different times, changing sides. This is a very 19th century paradigm. This is exactly what the UK and Russia did for a century in Central Asia, India, and we're seeing it again. We're seeing it in South China Seas, the Strait of Hormuz. the Arctic, the Red Sea, West Africa, Latin America. So hang on to your hat, Eleni, because it's going to be not just years, but I think decades of this.
I mean, so what you're saying is we haven't learned from history. We're just repeating the same mistakes. Interesting times. Where do you think oil is going? What's your take on oil prices? Let's end on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, they're in a softening at the moment, but I think that they're going to stay higher, much higher than trend. And this really goes back to what I said when we first began our conversation: choke points. We now have multiple choke points around the world: Strait of Hormuz for oil, South China Seas for commercial goods. The Arctic increasingly is an energy choke point, rare earth mineral choke points in different parts of the world. So we've left this kind of last 50 years of, oh, it's really easy to get things from point A to B to C. We are in a new world in which geography is being weaponized. Countries are developing their own regionalized systems, and it's not business as usual, and it's going to be a bumpier ride than in the past.
Rana Foroohar, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. As always, lovely to speak to you.